Hello guys and welcome to the Pig Daily, episode number 19. I need like a cute intro thing, like the day 9, like how to be a better gamer or something. But it needs to be a bit weird, how to be a fatter gamer? I don't know. Either way, today we're going to be talking about how to play Ling-bane-muta in ZvT. We're going to be looking at a replay of Guru vs Keen. This is something which I haven't put in a crazy amount of preparation. I don't think it's something which is overly technical. And as a result, we're going to try and do today's video in one part. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be half an hour long. Half an hour. So I'm going to be looking at the clock while this is happening. The last time I said a video would be about 40 minutes. I went for an hour and a half. So I kind of don't trust myself too much, but we're going to try and keep this one down and actually get it going in the right direction. It's not going to be something where we're looking at things on a very basic level. This is going to be more for players who have a decent amount of experience playing the game. The newer players as well are still going to pick up a lot of things and be able to learn from it. So yeah, I mean, we might as well dive straight on into the content. I guess before we do that, the the Pigsty Cup is on tomorrow, which is the tournament I'm running in my house. So I'm very excited to do that. If any of you guys watching are in Sydney, which I very much doubt it because everyone's asleep or on their way to work, please do drop by. The details are all up on Team Liquid, SC2C, and also on Facebook. There's an event for that. So that should be a lot of fun for all you guys who obviously aren't in Australia or in Sydney. Tune in online. We're going to be streaming pretty much the whole thing. I don't know if I'll be commentating all that much, but we'll just be kind of rotating in and just having people there commentate. It's just going to be a fun community event. So if you want to get a little glimpse into kind of like the local scene here, where we haven't had very many LANs for a while, but we used to have a really, really strong local LAN scene, check that out. All right, guys, so let's dive on in here and have a talk about Ling-bane-muta. Now, key points. Let's give a quick rundown of what we're talking about today. Ling-bane-muta in ZvT. It's something a lot of players say doesn't work anymore. You still see it in Korea a fair amount. You still see it at the highest levels a fair amount. Not so much in Europe, though. The main differences in terms of the style revolve around a shift away from mass muta. And also the game in HOTS, it used to be like Ling-bane-muta for sometimes like an hour. I remember the famous games of Su vs Flash even, where like Flash was like getting so far ahead and then Su was just staying on 2-2 muta Ling-bane and defending, battle after battle after battle. We don't quite see that extended mid-game anymore in Legacy of the Void. There's a shift away from mass mutas because obviously liberators are so powerful against them with their splash damage, and it's much more kind of Zergling focused and ground focused. You can't play those Scarlet style, tech up into mutas, get really fast muta upgrades, and get that muta ball going. I think the biggest changes though is to do with the economy, and this is something we kind of touched on yesterday when I was talking with TLO on our What If Wednesdays. And we were talking about the idea of, because the economy starts off with more workers now, everything's kind of supercharged up, it actually takes away a window where there's a slow build-up. And that slow build-up always gave Zerg a chance to kind of start edging ahead of Protoss and Terran in workers reasonably early, and gave Zerg a chance to kind of push forward in that direction. It also, I think, gave Zerg an opportunity to get mutas out before players could get 3 or 4 bases up. Before they could, often players were on 2 bases, mutas came out, they kind of struggled to take the third, it was a real challenge to secure the third, and mutas could really use their mobility and have a lot of angles to come in and do damage. Because the early game has jumped forward so far, but it still takes quite a long time to get up your lair tech, to get up your spire tech, mutas are coming into the game later. So even when you rush straight towards mutalisks with, say, a 2-base muta play in Legacy, the Terran can usually secure 3 bases almost instantly. Yes, he has to invest in defense, but it's very hard to get direct damage done if you're scouted. This whole idea of mutas being delayed is something which has affected everything throughout the matchup, and this is what we're always going to come back to, and why we have to be more Zergling focused is you just can't get damage with those fast harassment units quite as often. As a result, the way to play Ling-bane-muta is much more Ling-bane focused, much less muta focused. And we're going to be talking about the economy changes you have to do with how you build up, how you want to adjust the style, and really talking about our goals in terms of aiming to contest the Terran player on the map and actually fight him out there, rather than what we often see, and what I see almost every single day watching people play Ling-bane-muta, is them just being behind from the get-go. They're teching up to their mutas really fast, they're not getting enough work done with the mutas, and they're just behind. And they're just defending, and they're getting pushed back, and they've got next to no creep spread, and the Terran's coming in, and the Terran starts sneaking drops in because the Zerg has no map control because there's so much pressure on them. And, you know, the Zerg just steadily falls apart, and they hang on for a long time. But I can look back to usually 10, 15 minutes before they die and say, like, you're pretty much dead at this point. You're just hoping the Terran player is going to clump up his Marines and let you run your Banelings into them. So I think what we're going to talk about is trying to get in that strong position and actually make the style work in a consistent manner. So I did find an interesting replay to look at. Let's dive on into game and have a look at Guru versus Keen from the Corsair Cup, the most recent one, which Base Trade TV was nice enough to send out in one of their packs. So spawning down here in the bottom left-hand side of Dust Towers, we do have Guru. Very different Zerg player, very creative. Does a lot of his own styles, and he's going to be playing up against Keen. Of course, Keen, a Korean player who's been playing for a very long time, many times in Codes back in the day. Not quite at the level of his former glory these days, but still showing some very good performances. So the first thing we're going to see in this game is Guru go for a bit of an odd opening. He's going to go hatch. He's then going to drop a spawning pool. Okay, fair enough. Where's the gas though? What? What? Hatch pool hatch. What are you doing, man? That's crazy. That's crazy. So I don't want to keep pausing too much with this one because, like I said, I want to keep it shorter. I want to just dive through the content. Hatch pool hatch. What the hell? The gas is a bit later. This is a Dusk Towers reaction, right? A way to play here. You can definitely get your third up quite a bit faster on some of these maps, but especially on Dust Towers, your third base is like right next to your main and your natural. It's not too far away, so getting a fast third up can actually work out okay. And one of the important things here is what Guru is sacrificing is he's delaying his gas a little bit, saying, yeah, I'll get my Ling speed a little bit later, but it's fine, because I don't need that Ling speed until there's like Hellions out on the map. And that's going to be a bit later in the game. The initial Reaper I can fend with just a few slowlings, just with a Queen. But I instantly was thinking about this, and I was like, what are people going to want to know? They're going to think like, hatch pool, hatch pool. Can you just do that every game? Can Zerg get away with that level of greed? Well, something you've got to keep in mind is it's not necessarily going to be all that much stronger than just going a hatch gas pool and a slightly later hatch. What you're going to get out of this, the advantage, is you're going to be able to get more lava, right? The hatchery is going to finish earlier. Disadvantage is our natural hatchery is finishing and we don't have money for our queen straight away. So we're actually losing some lava as well, because this queen's going to be later, which means less lava injects popping out earlier on. So there's always a bit of a trade-off there. Excuse me. What's nice is even though we've taken this base in the back, so these drones are nice and safe from a Reaper, the Reaper has to come deep in to try and harass them, we are still going to have creep being able to spread from the third very early on. In terms of these sort of weird openings where the player goes for this like hatch pool hatch, they get the fast third up, what we're going to notice as well is there's going to be a little bit, oh, that hurts. There's going to be a little bit of a struggle to spend the money. And what's interesting here, right, is I was thinking like, okay, Terran players watching this going to be like, how do you punish this? Can Zergs just do this every game? What the hell, you know, what the hell do you do? And really, let's take a look at the lava count. So there's 3 lava there, but there is enough money to spend it. That's more Guru just being distracted by the Reaper than anything. But now we see, okay, 4 lava, no minerals to spend it. So already we see that even though the hatch is down, we're not able to spend every single bit of lava early on. So there's a delay on this build actually paying off. That being said, I still do think it is more efficient than a normal kind of hatch gas pool, taking the later third base at 2 minutes 50 or 3 minutes where the hatchery is already finished. But what you have to think about is you will get more lava. Now, you're not going to be able to make up that lava if instead you droned a little bit harder earlier on with the other build. So basically saying, I'm going to delay a few drones. I'm going to be getting my miners out a little bit later, But once I start getting them out and once I build my economy just a little bit, I'm going to be able to spend all this extra lava. I'm going to be able to keep it rolling, really just kind of have this beautiful economy. The reason this is fantastic is obviously about a minute down the track, you're going to have overall more mining. Even though you delayed a few drones, you're going to have more drones that have popped out consequently, and then everything starts to build up and it's okay. The point where builds like this can go wrong is right where you sacrificed a few drones and then you're about to make it back up and spend that lava on drones. You're like, I'm at the point where I'm about to make it worthwhile. If the opponent can pressure you at that point and force you to build fighting units instead of drones, you'll never kind of catch up with your economy to the point where you can spend all this extra lava. And you'll end up being in a situation where you're like, oh shit, this didn't really work out. However, in this scenario, it's okay. Why is it okay? Like we said, it's dust towers. So this base is here. Queens can easily defend it. There's no Hellions here super fast. Even when they do come, it's all right next to each other. We can pull extra queens down. It's quite easy to defend. We can just build drones out of the hatchery. If this hatchery was on Invader and it was like all the way up here or something, really far away from our main and natural, it would be a different story. So in terms of the opening, getting a third hatch is fantastic. We're going to get more lava. We're going to be able to, get this mineral mining more efficient really early on. But this is very specific to this map. I would say you can do pretty much the same sort of style, even if you're just going for a third hatchery at the standard, say 32 supply. But it is very important to get your hatcheries down early. And the reason is we're going to be exceptionally mineral focused in our play. And that's something we're going to see all throughout here. So I'm not talking about copy Guru's build exactly. What we're going to talk about though is the guidelines of what he's doing, the general rules and gist of what he's doing. And that is mineral focus. Look at this. Main base saturated, natural base saturated, third base getting very close to saturated. Really focusing on those minerals. We talked about how Ling-bane has to be your focus. A lot of you guys who watch my stream regularly would already be seeing a similarity to my rule of one gas build. That's kind of what we're talking about here. It's just we're seeing it executed a bit differently to the way I do it. It's this idea of get your 3 bases up as quickly as possible because we're moving away from the muta focus. We're saying we need to be able to contest Terran in the map in the mid game, which means a large number of Zerglings, a large number of Banelings. You can't just fight cost efficiently with melee units without having a lot of them. If you can't wrap around and surround, you're never going to be efficient. It's not like using these fancy Roach Ravager Infestor type compositions where you've got the range advantage. You've got these beautiful spellcasters. Ling-banes are much more meaty kind of, we just need to have the numbers and get in there and fight composition. So it's all about building this early economy to have enough units. So taking a look at it, we're just going to see Guru just drone. And he does also build a lot of Zerglings. Now, this is an interesting choice from Guru because Guru doesn't really have a lot of information. All he's seen is, that was the Overlord poking in, by the way. So, oh, no, he just sent a Zergling in. Okay. So he just poked up with the Zergling. All he sees is, hey, there's a second barracks up. Doesn't really know what the hell's going on. He's only just spotted the third CC. But up to this point, he didn't know that. So if we look at Guru's vision, no idea what's going on. So we're going to see here, he's like, okay, some Hellions. But then he's going to run out here with this little Zergling counterattack. Sees the third base. Sees, okay, so there's Hellions, a third CC, and some barracks. But up to this point, he wasn't really aware of what was going on. And this is something a lot of players say, I need help with scouting. So let's very quickly touch on scouting in ZvT and say, you don't always need to know exactly what's going on. All Guru knew was there's Hellions, there's Reapers, because those units came and pressured him. That's all he knew. But he kind of assumed and just had his general game plan, and he made a decision here to build about 20 Zerglings, just to keep him safe, just to try and cover him from any potential aggression. What could he die to? You always want to think about this. Whenever you're assessing a build, you always want to think like, looking at this build order, what is he exposed to? And did he know for sure that that wasn't coming? First thing that popped into my mind was a Hellbat timing. If he's only got Lings, a couple Queens, and he's just going for his lair, like, can he defend a Hellbat timing? Let's take a look. A Hellbat timing hits at 4 minutes 40. We already identified he didn't know that was coming until he just scouted 2 seconds ago and got like a little bit of info and saw the third CC. But it could have been coming. The factory timing, everything lined up. So if this was to hit right now, he would have about 20 Zerglings. How many queens have we got? 3 queens, only 3 queens, no spine, no Baneling Nest. Guru's playing a little bit greedy here. He's cutting a corner there. And this is why I said I don't want to be talking about let's just copy Guru's build. Let's just do exactly what he is doing. He didn't have info that a Hellbat timing wasn't coming, and yet he played greedy against it. He would have died if a Hellbat timing hit him. So we say, like, okay, cool. We don't necessarily need to copy that part of the build, but we can see that, let's think about every other option. That's one small option. That's a small percentage of his ZvT games. But if we think about everything else, he's got a lot of Zerglings. He's got a Lair coming up. He's got a Spore in the main. So, okay, this will kind of help defend Liberators here or Widowmine drops. Zerglings will crush a Widowmine drop. If there's a very fast tank evac pressure, the Lings will get on top of it. Pretty much every other option Guru is covered against. And he's doing it with a very skeleton-style defense. So if you are interested in a more solid build in terms of defending, your Hellbat timings and all that sort of stuff, check out my Rule of 1 gas build. But if we're just looking at the general gist here and saying, let's be safe against most things, Guru's build is actually pretty damn good. It's only really exposed against the Hellbat timing. And what we're going to see is he's just saying, look, we've just got 1 creep tumor, we've just got our 4th queen out, all we were focusing on was drones, drones, drones. And this especially works well off his early opening with that fast 3rd hatch. He's saying, if I can get away with this, look at this. These Zerglings can go pressure, we're forcing Keen to evacuate that 3rd base, his stim isn't done yet. You know, he doesn't know if this is going to be a big Ling-bane all-in or what. He's got to lift this 3rd, and he's quite afraid. He doesn't know what's happening. Meanwhile, back home, we're going to start to see that gas transition. So let's go back about 20 seconds until this gas transition started. And this is probably the most important rule you always want to apply, no matter what you're doing with your Ling-bane-muta build. If you're building a Ling-bane-muta build, like, you can maybe get a 2nd gas early on, maybe, but I would say 95% of the time, the one super solid way to play a macro-focused Ling-bane-muta style is just like this. So let's take a look. Right here at 4 minutes 40, main base saturated, natural saturated, 3rd base saturated, all at 15 drones, so they're just slightly underneath. And only 1 gas geyser. And it is only at this point that we're going to see Guru say, let's drop some gases. So he's staying on 1 gas until 3 whole mineral lines are saturated, and then he says, all right, let's start adding those gas. And he'll add them on the 3rd base in about 20 seconds as well. Say, okay, oh yeah, we're getting some extra drones here, it's getting oversaturated, let's take some more gases. And not only that, but a 4th base and a 5th base. What? What the hell are you doing, man? You can't do that. That's not safe. People often like to look at these expansions that are going out there and they say things like, that's not safe, or you can't get away with that, man. Like, what the hell? Yeah, you can. It's fine. A hatchery is 300 minerals. If you're doing a very mineral-focused build, it's really not that much money. Keep in mind as well, it might be like 5 bases, but the 5th base is really just a macro hatchery. We don't see any intention from Guru to build an extra macro hatchery as well. He's like, no, well, if I'm going Ling-bane-muta off a macro style, he knows he needs 5 hatcheries. So you always need to have 4 bases very early on. In this case, it's 5 minutes 30 when he's taking the 4th, but sometimes you can take it even earlier than that. And he's going to use his extra creep queens to inject on those hatcheries as well. So not just injecting 3 hatcheries, but he's going to start working in, if not a regular cycle of injecting on these hatcheries, he's at least going to start dumping excess energy in there off any extra queens he has. And this is what's going to allow Guru to explode up in tech. Now keep in mind, Guru has gone for quite a fast lair this game. He's gone for the fast spire. That's the main reason why he couldn't afford the defense of, say, extra queens and a spine crawler against a Hellbat timing or a Baneling nest. He was saying, look, we're just building our economy and getting the fast spire. Maybe he just likes mutas for map control. Maybe he wanted to shut down range liberators in case they came. Either way, this is a very well-timed spire. But notice how Guru is not going for everything at once. And this is a pattern you want to apply in all of your builds, is don't go for too many things. Notice he's really invested in that economy. We're talking about how he droned really hard. He's got the fast 4th, the fast 5th. What has he skipped in order to do this? Well, he's had a very efficient opening, so he's both teched and built his economy, but he's delayed his upgrades quite a bit. Only now is he adding his first evolution chamber. He still doesn't have a baneling nest, and you might be like, what the hell? How can you do this without a baneling nest? Remember, we're going to have so many Zerglings. Think about it. In these early stages of the game, what do we have threatening? I mean, we've got like a tank evac and like 20 Marines. Having a couple banelings versus that would be nice, but it's not 100% necessary. Just having a decent Zergling count is what will keep you safe against these sorts of aggression. So Guru knows he can cut that corner. He's going to get the Evo chamber down quite late, start his upgrades up. And we see already he's at 66 drones. So all 6 gases, 3 mineral lines fully saturated. Let's check the benchmark for when he hit that point of saturation. This is something you can compare to in your own games. And you can say, okay, at what point does he hit that? So he actually built a lot of units. So he's only hit the saturation at this point. And that's because he built a lot of Zerglings. He could have hit it even earlier. But 5 minutes 45, we are at 66 drones, 3 base saturated. Spire almost done, Evo chamber well underway, baneling nest will be going down soon, 4th and 5th hatcheries on the way. That's a really interesting benchmark. You always want to look at these and think like, okay, that's a very early point to do that. And whenever you're playing Ling-bane-muta, that's usually what your goal is. In a macro-based style, if you're not opening up with some janky, really fast mutas, you want to be rushing up to that 66 drones, that 3 base saturation. And even though you want to get a fast 4th, you want to get a fast 5th even, or a macro hatch, you want to get your creep spread out, you're not really looking to drone those bases. Once you hit this point, your only focus is just massing units, because you know Terran's going to start pressuring you. There's multiple kind of danger zones that Terran can hit you at in ZvT. In HOTS, they were more well defined. It was always like 4 minutes 30, 6 Hellions arrive. What was it? I'm trying to remember HOTS timings because the game time was completely different. There was a few different timings, but basically there's the early timing where Hellions can run in and just kill your drones if you don't have Zerglings. So that's something obviously we're always going to be ready for. The next one is when drops start to hit. When you see that double medevac unload and the Marines stim into your mineral line, you've always got to have units ready for these timings, and especially if you can just shut them down, then you can continue your creep spread, you can get overlords on the edges of the map, you can see everything that's happening, and that's when ZvT, especially with Muta Ling-bane, becomes comfortable. It's when it becomes easy. There's a bug on my monitor. I'm gonna kill it. Fuck Zerg in real life. So yeah, let's look back here in game. What are we going to be looking at? Alright, so he's pumping units. That's what we were saying. We're talking about he's just pumping units to be safe. He's going to start getting some upgrades soon. And you always do this off 3 base saturation, no matter what's happening. If you don't have any information, you just do this, because this is the generic point where Terran's going to have tech up. Keep in mind, Keen's gone for a fast 3rd command center. He's getting a lot of production. He's got double engineering bay. He's going for a full macro build, and he's still hitting this very strong pressure right now. And that's why we kind of have this built-in timing to build units. It's because like even when Terran's being super economic, they can still attack us right now. Guru comes in with a little bit of a mistimed flank there, and just not quite enough Zerglings. So he's going to take a really bad trade. We're going to see Keen just kill the 5th base. Starts to really get some tempo going. However, then the mutas come out, and all of these units are forfeit. Only the medevac gets to escape. And you might be like, oh, but he lost the 5th. And that's the strength of taking 2 bases. Rather than say, just a macro hatch and this base, if that base then died, you'd be like, crap, I don't have a 4th. And that's a real pain, because after you shut down their first pressure, whenever you win a first fight, whenever you feel the momentum shift back into your court as a Muta Ling-bane player, that's when you want to build a big round of drones. So you kind of have these different tiers you work up to. Tier 1 is just rush to 66 drones with just enough units to stop like a Hellion run by or a Hellbat timing or a Widowmine drop, you know, just those smaller pressures. And then it's like 3 base saturation, pump out units nonstop. And then after you've got good map control, or you crush an army or a pressure like that, that's when you say, I want to go to my ideal ultimate end game drone count now, which is about 80 drones, 75, 80 drones. Depending on your skill level, it can change up a bit. Obviously, if you're in the middle or lower leagues, you're probably happy to sit on 66 drones all game and just kind of Maynard the workers to the new base, as long as you're still spending efficiently. But if you're in the higher leagues, especially if you're in Masters or GM, you want to be going up to that, 80 drones, so you can afford to just throw Ling-bane at your opponent from all sides. Especially because as the game goes on, Ling-bane does become less cost efficient. The power, though, is in its mobility and its ability to absolutely shut down your opponent's aggression. Let's go back into game and talk about that idea. Imagine if this was Roach Ravager. He'd just pick up, stim his Marines, and run back across the map. But because we've got Muta Ling-bane, we shut down the tank, we killed the last of the Marines, we chase him all the way back to his base. There's constant threat of a Ling-bane timing coming in as well. Keen has to be shitting his pants right now. He's going to be really worried about a counterattack. Roach Ravager doesn't quite have the same volatility. It doesn't quite have the same aggressive potential and counter-aggressive potential. So what this buys for you is a lot more map control with your units. And whenever you do get any tempo or any momentum, you want to use that by diving up in that drone count. And that's exactly what we see Guru doing here. He's gone up to 77 drones. Notice we see there's heaps of drones coming out from all of his bases. And now he's adding second Evo chamber, Baneling nest, and he's actually even going for an infestation. Let's also talk about one other little thing we didn't mention before. The third base. Look at this. The fourth base, he realizes, I can't defend it. Immediately puts down a macro hatch. This is after his first Lings went in and couldn't clear it up, and he's like, oh crap. Immediately puts down a macro hatch. He says, well, if we lose the fifth, it's fine. It was really just a macro hatch. Cancel that. And even before he's cancelled it, he's already got another one down. Guru realizes the amount of production he needs to produce Muta Ling-bane off this economy, and he's going to make sure he maintains that level of production. So let's fast forward from here. And we're about to get to kind of the mid to later stages where definitely Guru's in a fantastic position. His Muta's kind of going and dancing around a little bit. And like we said, he goes straight for that infestation pit. So second Evo chamber coming down. I like that he only went one Evo earlier because he didn't want to, invest too much in upgrades considering he built such a big economy and was going for Mutas so fast. So he kind of sacrificed his upgrades a bit. He's going to be a bit behind on those. But that's fine. Because he's now got so much map control, the creep can spread uninterrupted. His creep is going to just start to blossom. And because he's got so much room for himself, we already see an infestation pit. Realizing that Muta Ling-bane is not the end of everything, Guru knows there's a very different momentum. When you're looking at Heart of the Swarm, we were talking about at the start of the show, you can stay on Muta Ling-bane versus Bio back and forth for 20, 30 minutes. In Legacy of the Void, it's a battle to maintain map control, get creep going, and buy yourself time. Muta Ling-bane isn't necessarily about just kind of staying on Muta Ling-bane for an extended period. It's about using the Muta Ling-bane to establish great map control, a good economy, and buy you time while you tech towards Ultras. Ultras and Hive Tech is still pretty much always the end goal in ZvT. Terran, once they get to like 180, 190 supply, Muta Ling-bane armies they're just not very effective. Roach Ravager armies, if they've got a decent siege tank count, they're just not going to be effective. So we see that Muta Ling-bane, though, because it has that volatility, and if you watch a lot of Korean pro games, there's a lot of all-ins. They throw off Muta Ling-bane, just these random Ling-bane busts, these random Muta Ling-bane busts, which are really powerful. Because of the threat of all of that, as well as the ability to just shut down the Terran's pressure, it makes it very uncomfortable for the Terran player to play this. You've got to think about this from the Terran perspective, where he's sitting on his side of the map, and if he moves out, he knows that if he ever overextends, he might just lose his whole army, and then, the game's over. The Zerg just has free reign. He's got to be very careful with how he pushes out onto the map, and he needs to make sure he has plenty of anti-Baneling and so on. Something which is very interesting in this game is Keen actually goes for a second starport, and I feel like if he just built his Widow Mine count and focused on that earlier, then he probably would have had a better shot. But he's gonna play it his own way with like Liberators and so on. He's gonna try and get the Liberators. Now here we come to an interesting point, and this is where I start to kind of disagree a little bit with what Guru does. Now notice how Guru's Mutalisks haven't done a lot of damage. The identity of the Mutalisks in Legacy of the Void is not necessarily the same. Now, if you are getting damage done with your Mutas, if these guys are running in there, killing units, or your opponent's like dropping all over the place like crazy, and you're like constantly cleaning up drops and like fighting down and dirty, Mutas are going to be great because they're trading. They're being effective because they're getting damage done. Now, the problem people start to face is because liberators come in, you can't use them unless they're getting those trades on. So if you like mass up 25 mutas, but you haven't been doing damage, and then your opponent has had time to build liberators, well, your mutas don't really help in the front-on engagement. If your opponent's good with their liberator positioning, your mutas don't really get counterattack damage done. And they're still a bloody expensive unit. It's 100 minerals and 100 gas for each muta. So, I mean, we're following these mutas right now. Why are we following these mutas? Because they're not really doing anything. But look at the unit count. 19 mutas, 21 mutas. And as I said, this is where I disagree with Guru's decision making. Going to 21 mutas when you're not actually actively doing damage and cleaning up units, I think is very excessive. I think he actually had such a good lead in this game, it almost doesn't matter. But, I mean, check it out. We see here 4 liberators in production at a time. Keen's about to hit 6 liberators. What the hell are your mutas going to do then? And you've got to keep in mind, it's not just, oh, are my mutas going to be cost efficient? It's what do your mutas take away from your army? Not just in money, but in supply. We're already looking at a Guru who's up on, let me just double check. He's on 81 drones. He's actually going to drone even higher in this game. And then he's got 42 supply tied up in mutas. You're looking at a Terran player who's often only on 60 or 65 SCVs. So that Terran player, when he's maxed, is going to have 135 army supply. And then you've got a Zerg who's like, well, I've got 40 supply in mutas that don't help much, and 85 supply in drones. So let's say I have about 80 Ling-bane army supply versus your 135 Marine Marauder Widowmine composition like supply. It's like, wait a second. If you're down 55 army supply, I suddenly don't imagine Ling-bane doing that well, even on creep. Shit starts to get very, very scary. So this is why you've got to be very careful with that muta count. And as a general rule, we like to say something like, yeah, 14, 15 mutas is probably the maximum you want to go to. Sometimes stopping at 10 or 11 and just going straight to Hive and starting to add the Corruptors in is fine, especially if your opponent's already building Liberators early. Why invest in it? In fact, a lot of players just go straight to Corruptors, especially if the Terran already has Liberators. They just say, let's just build Corruptors. And you're still playing this Ling-bane focused style. I know it's not technically Ling-bane-muta, but that's something to keep in mind. Usually you're just using mutas for cleanup. The reason we prefer them over Corruptors is they're more mobile. They've got the ability to chase down drops, which Corruptors obviously can't do. You unload a few Marines and the Corruptors have to run away. But only in a more action-packed game where you're trading constantly or you're getting in their base and doing harassment, only then do you want to build up to that big mutable similar to Hot style. Now, at this stage of the game, like we said, there's a pretty fast Hive transition going on. The Muta Ling-bane doesn't necessarily want to attack into a bad choke point up a ramp. It definitely wants to fight right now because Guru knows he had such a big economy advantage. And he's up to 86 drones. He knows he's got a great economy. He wants to find a fight. He's spreading his creep out constantly, but he doesn't really need to. Because Hive's finished, we should be seeing that Ultra Cavern on the way. That's something he should have been starting about 20 seconds earlier. We see the Ultra Cavern now go up. That's a very dangerous position for the Ultra Cavern as well. You should always put the Ultra Cavern in the back somewhere where it's very hard for them to push towards. Likewise, at this stage of the game, I once again disagree a little bit with what Guru decides to do with his army. Now, it kind of makes sense because he's just in such a good position. He's got such numbers, right? And he's got such a big economy behind it. But army supply, wait a second, remember we were talking about that army supply. You're always going to be higher on workers, which means less in army supply. Terran's max now. So we're actually down about 14 army supply is our Zerg player. So Guru, he's going to try and come in for a trade, but he realizes this is just an atrocious angle. A siege tank shot there kills like 10 banelings in one shot. Absolutely brutal. And we find Guru starts getting shoved back into an awkward position. He's spotted all these Liberators and he's building Corruptors now. But wait a second. 2 Corruptors, 5 more on the way, 7 Corruptors and 18 Mutalisks? We're going to have so few units that are actually good at engaging the ground army. All we've got is +1 attack on these mutas. They're going to be really hopeless against Marine Widowmine. This is a very dangerous situation for Guru, and I feel like if Guru wasn't as far ahead as he was, this game would have worked out differently. So let's talk about it in terms of theory. You get to Ling-bane, you secure your big economy. What do you want to do once you hit the middle stages? Well, preferably the Terran's attacking into you, you're flanking it around his army, jumping on top of it and crushing it, right? That's the ideal basic scenario. However, in this game where Keen sat back a bit longer, Guru was kind of going up with his army and looking for a fight. But we noticed that he kind of showed his whole army very early. He was very obvious and blatant about, I want to fight you. And Keen was like, well, I'm just going to sit back, wait a little bit longer. And what's Keen waiting for? Keen's like, I'm going to wait for 2-2 to finish. He's like, I don't want to fight till that 2-2 is finished. I'll be up 1 upgrade, +2 carapace. We'll luckily time out with it. But as the Zerg player, we were talking earlier about once you hit max supply, you don't have as much army supply. Once you get to bigger fights, Ling-bane isn't as cost efficient. Especially if you've built lots of Mutalisks, they're not good in a front-on fight. Even when you don't build this many mutas, even when you don't have this many drones, I still feel like the best way to play is to use your mobility, use your positioning, and make it the game very difficult for Terran. So one of the strongest things is to always send out huge Zergling counterattacks. At this stage of the game, why are we sitting back and trying to take a front-on fight? I mean, why do that when instead we could take all of these Zerglings, maybe 50, 60 Zerglings, we could have them hidden down here. As Terran reaches the center of the map, we're up here posturing with our Banelings and Mutas, and then, bam, backstab, dives in, goes for the reinforcements, the 4th that's trying to be secured, and the wall. And suddenly Terran, keep in mind, they have to micro so much against Banelings. They have to micro so much like, oh shit, raise depots, stim these guys. And then, your Banelings can run in on the front. You start forcing Terran to micro in multiple areas, they're going to make mistakes. But not just are they going to make mistakes, it slows them down. Remember, what are we waiting for? Ultralisks. We're waiting for that hive tech, those ultimate units to kick in. We've got adrenal glands on the way in Ultra Cavern. So as a Zerg, once you get closer to 200 supply, your focus really should be shifting more into let's attack from behind. Let's come in with those counterattacks. And I think that's something which Guru probably should have focused on a little bit more in this game. So let's take a look at how this goes nonetheless. In this army, there are only 5 Widow Mines, and I really feel like that's the only reason Guru survives this game. Because Widow Mines, if you get to like 10 of them or so, with like a max out Marine Marauder army like this, as well as Liberators to stop the Mutas coming in, they're going to just massacre Ling-bane. But as it is, Guru ends up just barely cleaning this up. He pulls every single queen from his bases, even to help fight those Liberators. He does spread his mutas out quite well, and most of the Liberators were shooting the Corruptors. And he just barely has enough units to overwhelm this. But keep in mind, if there's another 15 Marines left over, they could just chew through these +1 mutas. These are 2-2 Marines. They could just go stim, bam. And then he loses his creep in the middle of the map. He could potentially lose all of his queens. Things could spiral very hard from here. However, if Guru instead just pulled back, postured at the front, made it look like he was going to go in while sending Ling counterattacks in, he could easily buy himself a minute or two. There's no way Terran can just dive all the way on creep against Ling Speedbane, especially not when he's having to deal with counterattacks at the same time, and that would easily buy time for chitinous plating. So I definitely think recognizing when you're strong with Ling-bane and recognizing when you're weak and really shifting your priorities is one of the most important things you can do. Realize that you're very strong at 150, 160 supply. If you've built your economy clean early game, there's this big point, 150, 160, even right when you first get to 180, 190 supply, where the Terran's still only at like 150 supply, like he's a bit below you usually, if you've built your economy really well. But as their production has just a little bit longer to kick in, the Terran production can actually keep pace with the Zergs very well. And the units just get into those bigger armies where the ranged units have more value. You start butting up on your supply cap and you can't use all of your money necessarily to bring value into the fight. So you kind of have to be very focused on understanding the phases of the game when you're playing Ling-bane. You need to think about, I'm strong at this point, it's time to go out there and look for fights. Okay, now it's time to swap into counterattack mode. We're on buying time mode. And that's why that infestation pit timing was so important. And that's why, all of those things do come together to make it quite useful. So guys, the rest of the game is going to drag on a bit. We're going to keep talking about it, but I want you guys to start posting your questions now in chat using @x5_pig tag so that it highlights it for me. Shout those questions out. We'll answer those soon. We'll also be giving out an Abatha code at the end of the show as well, so stick around for that. For now, we're going to take a look at the rest of the game. We're just going to kind of look at it and see how the late game unfolds and take a look at what happens when these Ultralisks come out. So, Keen maintains some pressure on the map, but he gets actually surrounded here by a lot of Zerglings, Mutas, and Corruptors, and things are starting to look horrible for Keen at this point. Losing this army is pretty disastrous. The Muta Corruptor, even though I said it was wasted supply, because Guru just has enough units, just barely, in each of these fights, it ends up getting value because it just instantly kills the medevacs, instantly kills the Liberators. So Guru ends up in a pretty damn good position. And notice he's got 3 Ultras on the way. He's got Chitinous Plating almost finished, +2 melee, +3 Carapace on the way. Unfortunately, a Liberator here is distracting him, and this is where Guru starts to make a few mistakes. We see here, Distracted pulls this whole army back to deal with a Liberator, and actually lets a Hatchery go down there. Very sloppy mistake. And this is the stage of the game where Zerg is very powerful. Like, you've got Chitinous Platings kicked in. What does your opponent really have? Marauders and Marines. If you get your Ultras out at a nice crisp timing, it is so damn powerful. However, Guru starts to, I think, waste a little bit too much time here, and he's also built an insane drone count to the point where it actually kind of hurts him because he can't quite have that many Ultras. These Mutas and Corruptors are still chewing up so much supply. And the Mutas, I mean, they are stopping this drop from coming in, which is great, but there's only 2 Ultras here. Ideally, at this point, Guru would be hitting with like 6 Ultralisks. Like, he's got 3 more coming, but if they were all together hitting right now, and there were more Ultras rallying in behind that, Keen would just be dead. There's absolutely no way Keen would be able to hang on here. As it is, though, he's going to be able to start a step back. He's going to be able to use the Planetary. And those Mutas just aren't quite able to get the value which we would have liked. Oops. Sorry about the mad observing skills, guys. And that's something you always want to capitalize on, that Ultralisk timing, right? You want to be doing the damage there. You want to really just shut them down and not give them a chance to transition. And if we look at the money of Guru, he still has a huge amount of money. He just tends to lack a big enough ground army to actually just crash through and force that advantage. Right now, there's still not enough defense here. A single Liberator, a bunch of Marines and Marauders, and a Planetary. This is Ultralisk food. But we're seeing 4 Ghosts on the way now. We're seeing that Ghost production. We're seeing 4 Liberators on the way. And Guru almost lets this game drag out to a very dangerous point. Once again, only 4 Ultralisks in this army. These Zerglings, they get chewed up by Marine, Marauder, Widowmine pretty easily. The Ultras are doing a fantastic job. But with only 4 of them, he doesn't quite have the numbers to overwhelm this Planetary. And if he killed this Planetary at any point, this would be game over. We see the units lost tab actually not too bad because so many air units have been going down for Keen. But it gets a little bit closer than it necessarily needed to be. So from this point, I mean, it's just late game ZvT, right? Just keep making Corruptors, Ultras, Lings, and Banes if you're in an advantageous position, and you usually will win the game. If you're not in an advantageous position, you might need to start using Infestors and Vipers and Broodlords and doing all this fancy micro. But most of the time, you're just focusing on this big, meaty ground army with some Corruptors overhead to shoot down the Liberators. Especially if your opponent's going Ghosts, just having a big enough ground army will always allow you to crash on through. Large amounts of drones have been dying here for Guru, well, about 15 since he went to that 90 count. But he's finally going to move on across this map. And he's going to start looking for these trades. And the Infestors, of course, are very important here because he can try to fungal these Ghosts. And here's a really cool move. If you ever find yourself like, damn, I can't really find the right angle to engage, dropping some Lings or Ultras is always going to be great. And then as the Terran's distracted, coming in the front. Unfortunately, Keen does a pretty good job here, so Guru's like, oh, he can't quite get on top of these Ghosts. He's landing a few decent fungals, but mostly these trades are going well in Keen's favor. But Guru's got the economy, he can afford to take these. His Ultras in the back are actually doing okay. And he's eventually just going to roll over, just using that superior economy. Yet again, a very lazy defense there, letting that hatch go down from Guru, but all things being considered, it doesn't really matter. He's got 82 drones. And he's just going to go in relentlessly with these ultras. There's just not enough ghosts to snipe all of them. Some fungal goes down. And Guru just winning through economy. Because of that position he established earlier on with the Muta Ling-bane. It's always funny when Terran's defending in this scenario and there's just like units trying to run back and forth through barracks, but there's always other ultras just killing everything. And as this base all goes down, I mean that's pretty much the last of Keen's economy. He's got like one base mining down there, this base kind of mining there, but he's losing too much, and Guru's economy is still intact. As long as Zerg keeps a few mining bases up at this stage of the game and can kill bases of Terran, Terran will be losing in the end. Cute move there that we should point out. Guru manually moved his Ultralisks into the mineral line and then let them attack, so that if they were attacking from up here and the SCVs were appearing down here, the splash wouldn't be hurting them. But by moving into the mineral line, the splash damage will actually kill the SCVs that are repairing next to where they're attacking. And he even manually focus fired the SCVs, so that's very good control out of Guru. Keen manages to hang on, but Guru is just going to come with one last wave. We'll just fast forward to that. No Zerglings, this is not the fight you want. Like 3 ghosts go down for like 40 Zerglings there. Guess it's a trade he can afford at this point. We see the drops getting cleaned up by Zerglings. Good, you know, fungal growth, bile. Super random Ravagers coming in at like 20 minutes into the game, by the way. But to each his own. And Ling's going to go into the main and clear up the rest of the production. More Lings coming in. Of course, with 3-3 and Adrenal, these Lings are just going to flood over everything. And we're going to see a very unhappy Terran. Alright. Alright. GG's. Alright guys, so I just wanted to show the end of that replay to show how it did wind out. I don't like to cut it off partway through, because then people are like, what happened? So we ended up going longer than we meant to, as we always do, but that's cool. So we're going to answer some questions quickly. Just before that, let's very quickly... Actually, let's answer the questions. We can do a little sum up at the very end. Alright, so Eric WM says, Pig, how do you decide how many banelings you should make against the early game Terran pushes that normally happen right before the mutas are out? Well, it's interesting, you know, often I go mutas quite late. When I do this sort of style, I actually take the mutas much later a lot of the time. So just keeping in mind that your mutas might even be heaps far away. Generally, when you hit that main danger zone where medevac drops can come, you want to always have about 5 or 6 banelings just pre-morphed with your army, because you never know if a drop's going to like get into your main without you spotting it and it's wedged behind a mineral line and your Zerglings can't get surface area. So in those scenarios, you always want to have a few banelings pre-morphed, and then you just want to base it on the situation. If your opponent's doing some weird push with 3 tank evacs and like 20 marines, a lot of players, I see that, they'll see that and they go, "Whoa," they make like 30 banelings. I'm like, hells no, all you need is Zerglings. It's only 20 marines. Zerglings wreck tanks because they just move in so fast, and especially if you spread them beforehand, they just move in so fast, the tanks get like one shot off before the Zerglings are on top of them. But slow banelings on the other hand, because your bane speed's not going to be done at this timing, that's going to be brutal. That's going to absolutely wreck you. So you've got to really kind of just adjust it based on the composition. Like if they're doing like, they've kept the Hellions alive, they morphed them into like 6 Hellbats with the 2 medevacs, it's like, whoa, okay, let's make like 15 banelings. Make sure you can just blow those Hellbats up instantly so your Zerglings can clean everything else up. But it always comes down to the situation a little bit. Just always make sure you've got a decent number of safety banelings hanging around. We have a question there from Firegreen. He says, I masters... no, that was earlier on. Eric says, how do you decide... Oh, that's the one we just answered. So, Akos Mike Joke says, Pig, I did some calculations of my own. If you have 4 hatcheries, when you hit 3 base saturation, you should be able to not build up a bank, making Muta Ling-bane. A 5th is good for robustness, but I think it's not necessary with 3 saturated bases. Well, mathematically, maybe that's correct. What you've got to remember, though, is there's a lot of points where you're focusing more on minerals than gas, so your gas is kicking in a bit later. So you're going to have more minerals and you're going to be taking the 5th hatch because you're also looking to drone your 4th very quickly. So you've got to get your production up ahead of time, because otherwise, say you're like, okay, I've just got, wait, so what was it you were saying? 3 bases just with 4 hatches, right? Yeah. So say you've just got the 4th base, no macro hatch, right? You hold off this pressure, you're like, cool. And then you build like 10, 12 drones, or even 15, 16 drones. You drone that 4th base. Suddenly you've got way more income. You can't spend the money. Not to mention, before that point, you're building Zerglings. Remember, mutas, banelings? Sure. If you're building lots of banelings and mutas, you're going to be able to spend your money pretty well, even without keeping up on your injects. But remember, we've prioritized minerals, and we're prioritizing Zerglings early on, because we don't have the tech for those units. Zerglings, for their cost, use up a hell of a lot of lava. So you always need to have excess. Also, on top of that, no one plays perfectly, even pro players. So you always want to have a bit of extra production to make up for any mistakes you might make in the game. B Muffin says, got any advice on how to play differently from Roach Ravager? Play Ling-bane-muta? I can't tell if that's a troll question or not. I really hope it is, B Muffin, because you're a regular viewer and a sub and a baller. I'm hoping that was a troll, man, because otherwise, Pat's head. What are the key times I should keep in mind for early game pushes, says Setter Left. All right, so a couple of key timings. Number 1, 4 minutes 40, a Hellbat push can come. This is at pro level, by the way. So obviously these times might be a little bit slower at your own level. So you have to kind of base it on looking at your own replays, checking when you lose something. Say, oh, at this timing, this tends to come. But 4 minutes 40, a Hellbat push can come. Likewise, a weird Liberator Hellbat push could come around then. Cloak Banshee Hellbat could hit just after 5 minutes 20 or something like that. If they hit with like 2 Banshees and 8 Hellbats or something. But generally from about 4 minutes 40 onwards, they can hit with any sort of annoying Hellbat push. Widow Mine drop can hit very early. So if it's a Widow Mine and 6 Marines, that can hit you at about 4 minutes 30, really fast. Depending on, of course, the map, the spawn locations. There are other builds that aren't so 3 command center oriented, that aren't as macro oriented, things like the 2-1-1. Go check out Reddit All Things Terran if you're a Zerg player. You want to read up on the Terran builds. The build where they go 2 barracks, a factory, a starport, they get 2 medevacs out with 16 Marines and stim super early on, and they can actually be dropping in your base with those double stim medevacs at 5 minutes. So that's also another scary one, but that one's much more committed, and they don't have any pressure in the earlier stages. That one's quite easy to scout because you're like, hey, there's no Hellions. So you kind of go, well, like they're either going 3cc or they're probably going to do some medevac Marine pressure if there's no Hellions on the map. There's a few other kind of tank-evac Marine pressures which can hit around the 5 minute 30 mark as well. But usually you don't even need to know about those coming or anything like that. And to be honest, a lot of these pressures, if you just kind of have built-in safety into your build, you can defend them. That's why I built my Rule of 1 gas build, where I always have 6 or 7 queens and a spine crawler, all finished by 4 minutes 40. And that just defends Hellbats, it defends Banshees, it defends Tank Evac, it defends Tank Evac Marine, it defends just all the different random pressures that can come. So even though I won't always have 100% information, I'm always safe against those things. So you can't always scout for everything, but often just by having set good habits in place, you're safe against 95% of things that can come your way. So even if your scouting is completely denied, you've still got a good chance of holding on against whatever comes. Alright guys, so thank you very much for hanging out. I think we are going to finish up and do the Abathur giveaway. Let me see if there's any really good questions there. One last question. Late game ZvT, SC2 Daredevil says, what do you think's better late game, Ultras or Broodlords? Because I've been trying Broodlords instead of Ultras lately, but, well, you didn't say anything else. Okay, but I know a lot of people are like, oh, the Ultras kind of get stuck on units. I think Ultras are always stronger if you can get them out at a crisp timing. There are scenarios where if I've committed way more to my, say, a Roach Ravager army, and I've got like lots of Roach Ravager and Festa, I don't really have any melee upgrades on the way, it's kind of like a lower economy game, then trying to squeeze out like just like 6 Broodlords to just push with my Roach Ravager and Festa, I might try to do something like that, rally some Corruptors behind it. Broodlords are really good for that, but they can go down pretty quickly to, if you're ever not watching and Marine stim under them, they can go down very quickly to Vikings shooting them down. So if you build Broodlords, then you've got to build Corruptors. So it kind of becomes this very slow-moving, fragile army, where also you're like, okay, I've got to keep everything here, protecting the Broodlords, all right. oh, my opponent snuck 5 medevacs across the map and they're dropping in my main. Like, shit. I'm never going to win a base trade with Broodlords because they're so slow. So I personally think Broodlords are great to add in, but usually after the Ultralisks. Like, if the game goes on, I think adding Broodlords is great. I think if your opponent's not really good with their micro, Broodlords will just wreck ghosts. I guess it kind of comes down to if you micro the Broodlords and if they micro the ghosts. Like, if both sides are microing well, it turns into this intense micro battle. But I think generally most players at anything other than top pro level struggle really hard versus Broodlords. So I think if you enjoy going Broodlords, they're working for you, keep it up, stick with it. All right, guys, we're going to give away an Abathur code. Thanks for hanging out, everyone who's watching on the stream. Today's episode didn't have as much planning go into it. We're going to try and do some more for the next one. So anyway, thanks for hanging out, guys. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a cactus to the moon. That's all for now. Goodbye and good night.